Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/spookshow. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player.
Not a bad question, Bert.
Inside the junk hole.
Sometimes that is better.
You eat chicken on Thanksgiving?
It just tastes so damn good.
Wolfman's got nard.
The opening credits were kind of cool, though, right?
Here's Johnny.
With the wolfbane blooms.
Thou art the one.
Star Child.
You are not gonna die from a shit.
What the hell did we just watch?
The All-American Spookshow podcast.
Hello and welcome to yet another edition of the All-American Spookshow Horror Podcast. I'm Josh. I'm joined here with my friends Donnie.
Hey.
And the Professor Smoke.
Hello.
Will couldn't be with us this week, but he is. I did manage to record his thoughts about Hack-O-Lantern a couple weeks ago when we did. Last week we did our 3rd anniversary show. But before that, we did Halloween Kills, and then the Slasher Roundtable. So it was all the way before that. Episode 77, we did Hack-O-Lantern, and when we did Halloween Kills, we kind of forgot to get Will's thoughts on Hack-O-Lantern. So I talked to him separately the other day. Like I said, he wasn't able to be here for the recording of this today. So I'm going to go ahead and toss to that, where I had a conversation with him about his star ratings and his thoughts on Hack-O-Lantern. So here that is. All right, so Will, this is your chance to finally talk about Hack-O-Lantern. For whatever reason, we didn't. I guess we just forgot. I guess between the schedules being all flipped around and availability of you and some of the other guys throughout October, we just kind of forgot to get your thoughts on Hack-O-Lantern when we did Halloween Kills. So this is your moment to shine on Hack-O-Lantern from 1988. So. Just to refresh your memory, it was directed by Jag Mundra and was starring High Pike and Gregory Scott Cummins. So, what are your thoughts? I guess what your thoughts are first, and then what's your star rating, and then we'll get into a kill count if you got one.
What in God's name did I just watch? Jesus!
And why did I watch it six times in a row?
Man, that was an interesting movie. It was kind of hard to necessarily figure out what in God's name the purpose of that movie was. And I mean the fact that 20 years passed from the opening scene to the gut of the movie, and meanwhile, with the exception of the young children, everybody else stayed exactly the same. They didn't even pretend to do makeup or anything to age the characters. Yeah. I thought that was hilarious.
Especially the mom that comes to that comes to mind. It's supposed to be 20 years later, give or take, and she looks pretty much exactly the same.
What happened over the past 20 years? I got a new dress.
Yeah, that's it. And a lot of angst.
Well, this was right before Nirvana hit and everything, so it makes sense.
Yeah. Little do we know that Hack-O-Lantern was a big influence on the earlier Nirvana. Huh.
The young version of the lead character was actually Kurt Cobain. Yeah. Everybody knew that. Don't fact check that; just go with it.
Yeah, yep. And that's why there's a 5-minute heavy metal video that just pops up out of nowhere in the middle of the movie.
Yeah, and I don't even know that video was necessarily good visually effects wise for the time. Everybody quits playing, freezes, and then vanishes.
No, it was not for the time. And this and this is another interesting tidbit, that has come up a time or two since, just because it just amazes me. The budget for this movie was apparently $5.5 million. So I don't know where the hell that money went to, but it was not on the screen. We'll say that.
$500,000 for props and paying for everybody. The rest was cocaine budget.
Yeah, and a small island in the Keys.
That island was made out of cocaine.
Yeah. It was so big, it became one of the keys. So, yeah, I mean, we didn't come to any conclusions either when we talked about it as far as exactly what the hell was going on in this movie, what it was about. Our ratings weren't very friendly on it either. It just as a reminder, if you haven't listened to the episode or just for you, Will, before you give your star rating, Donnie gave it 1 star. Smoke gave it 1.5. Smoke and I did too. Smoke and I both gave it 1.5 stars. So with that on the table, what do you say?
Well, I say, honestly, like as we've done more and more podcasts with Donnie and we've gotten to kind of get a pretty good idea of where our ratings would go. So, it seems like I'm falling in line with Donnie more often than not. Uh-huh. So yeah, I'm gonna go with a 1. There have absolutely been some of the movies that we have watched where it's like, God, I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy of watching this. This one, at least you can make fun of from like opening scene to final scene. Like the opening scene in this, it absolutely felt like an old commercial.
Yeah,
like, it didn't even feel like it fit to the movie. Like the way it was shot, it almost felt like a Got Milk commercial right at the beginning. Yeah, no, I'm gonna go with a 1 on this one. Like, this is one you can kind of make fun of and just have a good time with. If you're able to rope anybody in God's green earth into this movie with you.
Don't.
If you're wanting to watch a movie about a satanic cult and incest, this is the movie for you.
Yeah. I don't know. I was going to say The Devil's Reign, but I don't remember whether there was any incest going on there. So.
No, this was pretty in your face with the incest.
It just came to mind too. This is basically just a even worse version of The Devil's Reign, if you really think about it. Like, yeah, the incest stuff aside.
Oh yeah.
This is just like a god awful version of that in a lot of ways.
You almost want to say it's a Devil's Reign on a cheaper budget, but it probably wasn't.
No, not at all. But obviously that was what when did The Devil's Reign come out? I think that was like the mid '70s. So this is give or take about 10 years after that. Yeah, 1975. So this is only about 13 years later. Just bad, all around, just bad. So did you have a kill count or anything? Or
the number on this one is going to be 8. We've got the dad off the top, Bill. Who was bludgeoned to death with a hammer. Mm-hmm. One good hit. Look, at least that was like, I feel like closer to like real life than a lot of movies are.
Yeah, if you get hit in the head with a hammer, you're probably instantly going to die, more than likely. And that's all.
Or you're just going to go down and then just never wake up. Yeah. It might take a while, but yeah.
yeah. Either way, it's going to kill you. More often than not.
We got Nora, who was impaled in the face with the cultivator. Brian, who was impaled with the shovel. We've got the party girl who got stabbed in the back. You got the girl that the song Beth was based around. Yeah. Grandpa finally bit it, and then Amanda Drendel, the mom, who passed away on the grave. The one that I left out was probably the saddest of all.
Yeah,
it was the decapitated goat head.
Yeah. Well, the power is in the blood.
What?
God. Yeah. I don't know. I don't even know what they were trying to do. Like they had this big meeting of the, all right, tonight's the night, boy. And then they go to the meeting, like, what the hell were they trying to do there? Like, it got dashed and it never happened, but they were going to turn him into Satan? I don't know what the hell.
Well, yeah, it almost seemed like, they were trying to have Satan embody whoever, that they were going to have take over the cult. But like, if that was the way it was going to go, then why not, hey, honey, I'm going to babysit the kids tonight and let you and your husband have a date night. All right, kids, we're going to play a game. I'm going to touch all of your foreheads.
Yeah. Boop. Done.
Yeah, it definitely seemed odd. God, this would have been such a fun movie if they would have been able to like pull it off, but they did not.
Well, we'll leave it there. I think, obviously, I think all your thoughts and your star rating, everything echoes everything we said. So we'll leave Hack-O-Lantern there in the dustbin, and I'm sure it'll come back up. Since we didn't re-rate this one on our 3rd anniversary episode, we will re-rate that one next year because we're going to kind of shift the calendar or whatever. So we'll see if anything changes come next year. But we are about to talk about Hellraiser. And since you don't have enough time to discuss that one today, we will have your thoughts on that one on the if not the next episode, the one after that when we do the Thanksgiving special. So I guess we'll just leave it there.
All right, sounds good, man.
All right, so now that we've got all the Hack-O-Lantern stuff out of the way, we'll go ahead and talk about what we've came here to talk about today, and that is Hellraiser from 1987. Now, this was the movie that won the Patreon poll in October for what we'd be watching here in November, and this is also kind of like the loose beginnings of us watching a new series, kind of like what we did with the Conjuring series over the last year and a half or so, however long it took us to watch all those films, where we would kind of come in and out of it, watching the latest installment or whatever. This is going to be our new series, kind of off and on, is like talking about the Hellraiser series. So we start here today with Hellraiser, and then eventually sometime next year we'll do Hellraiser 2 and 3 and so on. But this will be the new beginnings of a new series for us. So I'm looking forward to to see where the journey takes us along the way here. I have a feeling these movies, like a lot of these series, have varying degrees of good and bad and suctitude. Right? Make sure to stick with us and come along on the ride for through the Hellraiser universe.
Hey, and we do get a Hellraiser in space, so that'll be something to look forward to.
And honestly, it kind of naturally will lead us into the new Hellraiser, because I believe that comes out next year, right? Where we were just talking about that this past Wednesday on the live stream about the new. I'm completely blanking on the lady's name that's playing Pinhead, but they're going to switch it up. They're kind of do the old gender bend deal where it's going to be a woman playing the Pinhead part this time around. So that will, going through this series, will probably naturally lead us into that. Whenever that comes out next year, we can get to that one, so that'll be cool. But before we get any deeper, I'll go ahead and toss the usual information. If you want to email us any comments, questions, whatever, you can do that at allamericanspookshow@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter. Our handle is @AASpookshow. You can find us by searching for All American Spook Show on Instagram, Facebook, the Slasher app, on TikTok. We're not as active over there, but we do have, from time to time, I need to get better about it, but we do put stuff on TikTok, so that's there. Of course, our YouTube page. You go there every Wednesday. We do a Deadline Horror News live stream. Of course, if you can't be there, that's on every Wednesday at 9 p.m. East. If you can't be there live, YouTube archives that stuff, so you can still go there and pull up the stream, even the next day or whatever. If you can't attend live, it's still there. Of course, we've got Patreon, patreon.com/AASpookshow, where every Tuesday a new video minisode comes out. The main event there is the Library of the Professor, where Smoke takes something from his library and he talks about it and gives ratings and whatnot. It's always a fun time there. So, and we have our Patreon poll every month. So if you become a patron, you can vote on that poll. Your vote officially counts if you become a patron, and other various things. Bonuses for our patrons every month, and you get early access to the episodes, all kinds of cool stuff. So go to patreon.com/spookshow to check that out. And of course on TeePublic, we have a page there, or a shop there, where you can go and get t-shirts, mugs, pillow covers and face masks and all kinds of stuff with the logo on it. All the various different logos that we've had over the last few years. And we have other cool designs on there, like Thou Art the One slap, stuff like that. a lot of cool, fun designs. We have like a VHS design over there. So go over to TeePublic and search for All American Spook Show, and you should be able to find us. And of course, down in the show notes, we have a link tree that has all the links of all these things, like right there at your fingertips. You click on that, it'll take you to another page. It's got all of our lists, or our list, all of our links listed right there for the picking. It's all right there in front of you. So I guess without any further build up for and all the hoopla leading up to this, we'll go ahead and toss to the trailer for Hellraiser from 1987.
I have seen the future of horror. His name is Clive Barker. Hellraiser. Beyond any terror you have imagined. A nightmare.
No.
Unlike anything you have witnessed, is born. Because within these walls, the unholy is unleashed. Hellraiser, a film by Clive Barker.
We'll tear your soul apart.
All right, so there you go. There's the trailer for Hellraiser. So, Donnie, I guess I'll toss to you first. I'm assuming this probably isn't the first time you've watched it, or is it?
No, I've seen this a couple of times. I think the first time was, probably early 90s. Yeah, I was scared shitless.
Yeah.
I was scared shitless when I saw this.
I remember, like, my first time watching this back, probably around the same time. This would be, like, early 90s probably.
Yeah.
I remember it like scaring me, like, holy shit, this is messed up. Like, this is messed up like I haven't seen before at that time. But it was just something more gross than I was used to for sure at the time. And so we were probably roughly around the same age when we saw it. And that's not something I would recommend for like a 10, 11, 12-year-old is to see this Hellraiser. To dive into the weird world of Clive Barker that way. But what were your initial thoughts on it? Like, maybe back then, I guess, like you said, it scared the hell out of you. But what about now? Like, what are your?
And now it's just like, we're just kind of desensitized because I would say that I probably am because there's not, I guess when you're a kid, you get into like everything, the visuals, the characters, and just everything. But no ounce of remorse at all as an adult. I was like, you fucked around and found out.
Yeah.
But no.
Back then, you're like, man, that's messed up. This is horrible. The horrible things that happen to you. Now you're just like, well, this is what happens when you fuck with a box.
Right.
Smoke. What about you? I know this is probably the 152nd time you've watched it. You own it on Laserdisc, VHS, all the usuals. What were your initial reactions back in the day and then now?
Oh, well, when I saw this, I was already a jaded horror fan, I guess. It was 87. I was already stopped. Well, I probably didn't see it until 88 because I did not see it in the theater, unfortunately, when it first came out. So I probably saw it in 88. I was 15 years old. By that time, I'd already seen stuff like Cannibal Ferox. Well, it was called Make Them Die Slowly on VHS. That movie was at the time. A lot of Fulci films and stuff. So the gore factor. It didn't take me quite as by surprise as far as the level of gore in it, but just the way it was put together as far as the production value behind it with that gore behind it was something you hadn't really seen at the time. And, of course, all the other stuff that's going on in the movie that we'll get into was definitely not something you saw in your mainstream horror movies at the time. And, yeah, I don't know how many times I've seen it over the years. There's been quite a few, but that initial one it did, like I said, the gore, it was a lot for a horror movie and a Hollywood horror movie at the time. As Donnie was saying, the visuals, all that stuff you take into account, the special effects, like again, we'll get into it, not to go too deep into it, but sort of the initial Frank transformation scene with the skin.
Yeah.
Just all that stuff, just like, whoa, this is just the special effects, the way everything went together was really well done, I thought. So that was my initial reaction to it. And then just watching it over the years, and I know we kind of talked about a little bit of this offline, the what the fuck moments of what is this movie about.
Well,
the first time you see this, you're like, what the?
Yeah, we'll definitely get into that conversation of what the hell. That's what I was going to get to a minute ago. Like when I first watched this, like beyond what you see and the goriness of it, and like you said, it's far more gory and edgier than a lot of the stuff at the time, for sure, as far as mainstream stuff. But the subject matter, too, like, it's hard to wrap your mind around not only what it's about, but what that it's about, like the sexual stuff and all that stuff. Even when I'm like 11, 12 years old or whatever watching this, you knew there was something off there. You know what I mean? Like, this ain't normal. Like, what kind of sexual stuff is this? Well, that's sadomasochism, kids. Which we'll which we'll get into, but
mainstream sadomasochism. You don't even have to go to the back of the video store to get this one.
Yeah, it's front and center with this guy with pins all over his head. So yeah, I guess we'll go ahead and get into the the background information before we start talking about the movie. Now, before I do anything, I'm going to try here in our quote unquote new year to get better about reminding you before we get deep into anything. We are a spoiler-filled podcast, so if for whatever reason you have not watched Hellraiser, pause this, go watch the movie. We listed on our socials all the various places that it's available. Some of them are free. It's on Tubi TV. It's on Hoopla, which is like a free thing basically if you have a library card. It's on Shudder, and it was on Amazon Prime. So hopefully if you're listening to this, you have access to one of those things. Pause this, go there, seek it out, watch the movie, and then come back and spend the next 45 minutes or so with us talking about it and breaking it down. But just wanted to give you fair warning now before we continue. We're going to spoil it. So background information. Now, I found two other titles. Well, I guess one working title, and then another one is basically just the complete title. It's also known as, the working title was Sadomasochist from Beyond the Grave. Now, that one's more straightforward to the point. Like, well, that's what this movie's about. The other one is basically, it's Hellraiser, but the complete title is Clive Barker's Hellraiser. So, depending on, like, where you see this movie, how they title it or whatever, it'll either just be straight up called Hellraiser or Clive Barker's Hellraiser. Either way, same thing. It was released May 13th, 1987 at the Cannes Film Market, which I'm assuming that means this is like where they went to kind of shop the movie around to a distributor, I guess. But it was released wide here in the U.S. September 18th, 1987 by New World Pictures, Cinemark Entertainment BV, and it was produced by Film Futures. And, of course, I believe it was distributed by New World Pictures as well. But best I can tell, the budget was around $1 million for this. Like, I saw another number that was a little less, like $900,000. But either way, right, splitting hairs. About $1 million to make this movie. So that being said, we've talked about some other movies of the same time period that had far more, a bigger budget than this, that don't look half as good as this. For instance, supposedly the estimated budget for Hack-O-Lantern, which came out a year later, 1988, was $5.5 million. And they made this movie for $1 million. Now, you tell me which one holds up and which one looks better and just which one's just an all-around better movie. That's crazy, right? If that $5.5 million number is true, that is crazy.
Must have spent most of that budget on cocaine or something. Isn't that why we determined?
Yeah. Maybe that was the only way you could understand it and enjoy it. But anyways, yeah, $1 million budget, and it was filmed like late September through like the end of 1986 at the production village in Cricklewood, London, England, and then a few other various locations in London. The domestic box office for that weekend. So this is the weekend of September 18th through the 20th of 1987. That was the weekend that it opened. I'm going to run through the top 10 because sometimes, in these older movies, we don't have this information. We have it on this one, so I'm going to run down it. Actually, I'm going to start a little before I'm going to give you the top 12 because I just have to throw it in. Number 12, RoboCop, was in its 10th week. Number 11, Hamburger Hill. Number 10, Can't Buy Me Love. Number 9, The Big Easy. Number 8, La Bamba, the story of Richie Valens.
It's just how you said it.
La Bamba. Number 7, No Way Out.
You got to sing the title of La Bamba.
Well, that is the title of the song, so La 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 Bamba. Anyways, number 6, Dirty Dancing, in its 5th week. I just highlight that one a tad bit because that's rare that we're going down the top 10 and there's a Vestron movie in there. So Dirty Dancing was number 6 that weekend. Number 5, Stakeout. Number 4, the top 4 all opened up that particular weekend. So this is what Hellraiser, the new releases, Hellraiser was against. Number 4, The Principal. Number 3, Hellraiser made $4.4 million in its opening week. Number 2, The Pickup Artist. And number 1, coming in at $7.6 million that weekend, Fatal Attraction. So there was definitely some competition. You know, even on that level, like Fatal Attraction probably pulled a few eyeballs away from Hellraiser, I would imagine, you know, since there was a little bit of similar genre going on there, a little bit, right? Not quite the same, but there's, you know, it's going to pull from somewhat of the same audience is my point. So a few other movies that opened up that weekend, Amazon Women on the Moon, Maurice, In the Mood, and Orphans all opened that same weekend. So that's a snapshot look at the weekend of September 18th, 1987. It went on to have a worldwide gross of $14.5 million, so not great, but enough, obviously, to justify, you know, to keep making some of these movies, you know, years later on down the road. On IMDb, it has 7 out of 10 stars, and that's out of 113,000 ratings on there, so pretty impressive. It has a Metascore on Metacritic of 57, which, you know, their scale goes basically from 0 to 100, so a little over, you know, basically right at 57%. Rotten Tomatoes, on the tomato meter, this is rare, because I don't know if I've ever, that I recall, remember seeing this whenever we pull these Rotten Tomato scores. 72% on the tomato meter and 72% on the audience score, so dead even on both. And that tomato meter is at a 50 review, so it's not just like, you know, 5 or 6 guys reviewing it, and, you know, it's actually got 50 reviews on there. And the audience, 72%, 50,000 ratings on Rotten Tomatoes. So no matter how you slice it, basically about the same score, other than Metacritic Metascore, about the same on IMDb as it is on Rotten Tomatoes. Of course, this movie was based on the 1986 novella The Hellbound Heart, which was originally published in Night Visions 3. And also, I thought it was interesting to point out, Night Visions 3, it was like a collection of, like, you know, these novellas or short stories or whatever. So there's 3 or 4 other stories in the book in this particular Night Visions 3. But the whole collection was edited by the one and only George R.R. Martin, you know, from Game of Thrones fame. He actually edited this collection. That just so happened to pump out Hellraiser from Clive Barker, so that was pretty cool. Of course, this movie was directed and it was written by Clive Barker, like we said, directly from The Hellbound Heart. He went on to where he directed, this was his directorial debut, by the way, Hellraiser, but he went on to direct Nightbreed and Lord of Illusions, and he was a writer on Rawhead Rex and Candyman. Needless to say, there's a lot to be said about Clive Barker, which is why on our next episode, we're going to do a Spookshow Spotlight episode on Clive Barker. So that's why we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about him today, because we're literally going to devote an entire episode to him next week. So just know that we will be getting around to it. I know there's a lot to say about Clive Barker, and we will get there next week. The producer on this was Christopher Figg. He produced Smoke, a movie that you brought up a number of times that you said we should have done in the Summer of the Wolf. He produced Dog Soldiers.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And he also, of course, was a producer on Hellraiser 2 and 3, and maybe even on the other ones, but that's just some of the highlights that I saw there when I was looking through his IMDb there. Music, which, you know, I think there's a really good soundtrack, you know, at least one really good cut in this movie, and that was done by Christopher Young. He's got a pretty full resume himself, like 200 and something, like, composer credits, I think it was, on IMDb. Yeah. He did the music on Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. He worked on Trick or Treat, you know, the one from 1986 that we did back in episode Flimity Flav. I can't remember what.
Yeah, that was 1986. I believe that was just recently here.
That was
recently. No, it was episode number 42.
Yeah, I was about to say, I know that it was last October.
Yeah, it was last October.
Yeah, there it is, episode 42. So there's a connection there, and of course he did the music in Tales from the Hood, which was one that we teased that we were going to do, and then all of a sudden, like, there was some riots or something that broke out, and we're like, you know what, maybe now's not Floyd. It was the George Floyd stuff last summer. So we kind of like decided, like, you know, maybe now's not the right time for 3 white dudes from the Carolinas to talk about Tales from the Hood. So we just kind of pulled back and we never got back to it. But we will get to that movie. That movie's awesome. No question about it. I think we all enjoyed it, but we need to get back to talking about that one. It just, the timing wasn't right on that. But yeah, like I said, Christopher Young though, like I just quickly pulled it up on IMDb just to be sure I had the number right. He has 130 composer credits on IMDb, so I was way off on the number, but still, that's a lot. And he's still working today too. I mean, like new stuff recently released, like the 50 States of Fright, which was that Sam Raimi series that was on Quibi last year. Now it's on like the Roku channel. The new Pet Cemetery, he worked on that. Sinister, Swordfish, Entrapment, The Grudge, tons of movies, Drag Me to Hell. So lots of things that we will talk about here on the show, and a lot of movies and stuff that fans of this are going to be fans of. So Christopher Young is a well-known connection in the Spook Show from here on out. I can guarantee you that. Like, he's already connected to a couple things, right? And he'll be connected even more before it's all said and done, for sure. The cast, we'll kind of go in credits order a little bit. So we've got Andrew Robinson played the role of Larry. Larry is the dad in the film. He is known for this. He was in Dirty Harry, Star Trek, Deep Space Nine. He was in Child's Play 3. He's got 110 acting credits. And he actually directed a few episodes of Star Trek Voyager and Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and that series Judging Amy back in the early to mid 2000s. There, he directed a handful of those, but 110 acting credits that date back to the 1969. He was in an episode of NYPD, but his first movie role was Dirty Harry. He played the killer, and in that movie he was actually his name was Andy Robinson instead of Andrew Robinson. In the credits of that movie. Tons of stuff throughout the years. He was in an episode of Bonanza back in the early 70s. Tons of shows in the 70s and 80s too, like Kung Fu, SWAT, Ryan's Hope, all that kind of stuff. Chips. Some of the ones that always kind of come up when we go run through somebody's filmography when they worked in that time period, like Barnaby Jones, stuff like that. So he was mostly like a TV guy, but he kind of came in and out of films throughout that time period as well. And then he definitely started making more movies around this time period because he was in Hellraiser and Shoot to Kill. Like I said, Child's Play 3 in 1991, Trancers 3, The Puppet Masters, all kinds of stuff. And he's still active today. His most latest work was an episode of the series Dota Dragon's Blood. It's a voice, so I'm assuming that means it's like an animated series or something. I'm not sure what that is. But, yeah, but he's still active today, so that's Andrew Robinson. Next up, we've got Claire Higgins, who plays Julia. Now, she is his wife in the movie. She has 78 acting credits that on IMDb date back to 1980. She was in the TV miniseries Pride and Prejudice, and she was in a number of series and TV films into the 80s. A lot of this is like British television stuff, like on the BBC Two Playhouse and stuff like that. Yeah. And it wasn't until she played in the movie 1919, a couple years before Hellraiser, but then a TV movie, and then Hellraiser came out in 87. After that, she was in Hellbound, Hellraiser 2, a movie called The Fruit Machine. I don't know what that's about, but maybe we'll get to that on the next episode, The Fruit Machine.
Two gay teenagers go on the run after witnessing a murder.
Well, there we go. It's right up Will's alleyway. Who knows? But he's known for, she is known for, like I said, Hellraiser, Hellraiser 2, The Libertine. She played Mrs. Gilmore in Ready Player One, for back in 2018. She's still active today. She still plays in a lot of TV series. And I'm assuming a lot of this stuff is still like British stuff because a lot of this stuff I haven't heard of right away. But she was born there in Bradford, West Yorkshire, England. So a lot of that stuff, that she's done has been over there. So definitely recognizable face, not just from this, but other things she's been in. You would recognize her face. Ashley Lawrence is Kirsty. She has 44 acting credits on IMDb that date back to 1982. She was in an episode of the series Capital, and then nothing for about 4 years, and then she was in an episode of Highway to Heaven. Then she was in Hellraiser. So this was pretty much her first big break for sure. And she appears again in Hellraiser 2, Hellbound Hellraiser 2, of course. an episode of the series that anthology series Monsters. She was in Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth, which once again we'll get to sooner than later. She was in an episode of the new Creepshow.
Yep.
Which I haven't caught up on that yet, so I haven't seen that episode yet, but she was in one. And, of course, she actually did appear in an episode of The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob Briggs, of course, as herself. That was the episode where they talked about Hellraiser 2. So that was last season, not this past season that, from 2021, but I think that was in 2020, last season. So, yeah, like I said, she's still active today. Her latest thing was she's a voice in a short film called Smile, and then of course the Creepshow. So that, and what the hell? She was a voice in that Dota Dragon's Blood series. So this must have some kind of connection to to Hellraiser for some reason, or Clive Barker or something. Let's see. Frank is played by Sean Chapman. He, once again, another English actor. He was born in Greenwich, London, England. He has 66 acting credits that date back to 1978. He was in the film Boarding School. He was in one of Donnie's favorite movies, Scum, in 1979. And then, of course, one of Smoke's favorites, Party Party, in 1983.
That's right, twice as nice.
Yeah. A couple other movies, and then eventually he was in Hellraiser. He's also in Hellbound, Hellraiser 2. I think that was the end of the road for him as far as the Hellraiser stuff is concerned. But
Yeah.
a lot of other things, a lot of TV series. Once again, I think this is like British television because I don't really recognize a lot of the names of this stuff. But his most recent thing was he was a voice. Or he was the narrator in a TV miniseries called Britain's Deadliest Lovers. An episode on Hugo Quintus. So that was the last thing, and that was 2016, so I'm not sure exactly why he hasn't done anything since then. But, yeah, he has remained active, but he would mostly be known for these, the first two Hellraiser movies. He was in A Mighty Heart and The Fourth Protocol, so those are the leads on IMDb. The guy that played Frank when he was... they even listed as Frank the Monster. So this is like the version of him where he's like his skin is not there, right? He's just muscle and goo. That was played by Oliver Smith. He has 53 acting credits on IMDb that date back to 1973. He was in an episode of the TV series ITV Playhouse. He was in an episode of Thriller back in 1974, that television series. He was in the TV miniseries Jesus of Nazareth back in 1977.
Yeah, from one extreme to the other.
Yeah, big time. You're in Jesus of Nazareth, you play Saul, and then all of a sudden you're Frank the Monster in Hellraiser, literally 10 years later. So,
Frank the sadomasochistic sex monster.
Yeah. He was in The Great Train Robbery and a number of like British series and stuff like that. Once again, he's mostly known for the first two Hellraiser movies, Jesus of Nazareth, and then a movie called Warship. So I would say he's a recognizable face, but he plays a bloody muscle monster in this. So I wouldn't necessarily say that. One other one that I think is important to point out here is the lead Cenobite, which everyone, of course, knows as Pinhead now. That was played by Doug Bradley. Now, Smoke, correct me if I'm wrong, I think he was the only one to play Pinhead until, like, that last Hellraiser movie, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think, I didn't do the count on how many sequels there's been. There's got to be at least 8.
Yeah, it's something like that. I had seen there's, and I don't remember which one it is, but it's... there's one of the other Hellraiser films from the 2000s where he is not Pinhead.
So I have the list of films right here. There's been 10 Hellraiser movies.
Jesus.
Some of these I even forgot fucking existed. So we got our work ahead of us here, boys. But I'll run down the list real quick. Hellraiser, of course, from 1987. Hellbound, Hellraiser 2 from 1988. Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth from 1992, Hellraiser Bloodline from 1996, Hellraiser Inferno 2000, Hellraiser Hellseeker 2002, Hellraiser Deader from 2005, and also in 2005, Hellraiser Hellworld. So there were 2 Hellraisers in 2005. Hellraiser Revelations came out in 2011, and Hellraiser Judgment came out in February of 2018. So that was the last one. And then, of course, there's going to be a new one at some point in 2022 that I believe is just going to be on Hulu. I think that we had talked about there. But
I do see here in his IMDb profile, I'm going to try to say this without laughing, but before he did Hellraiser Inferno, he was in this TV series called. I'm sorry, man.
Go ahead.
I can't even fucking say it.
Go ahead and spit it out.
I can't even. Oh man.
Where? Just tell me the year that you're looking at so I can look at it. Oh, wait a minute. I got it. He played Honky Doctor in a TV series called Honky Sausages.
I'm sorry, man. Oh God. You started listening off the sequels. I saw that and I just fucking died, man.
Well, look, he played Pinhead for like 8 movies. You know, he can break off and do Honky Sausages if he wants to.
Oh my God.
So, going back to that point that we made though before all that, he was in the first 8, Smoke, because the 9th Hellraiser Revelations was the first one where he was not in it, and then he was not in the 10th film either. Hellraiser Judgment. So whenever we get to those, so basically that means he has not played the role of Pinhead since 2005. Hellraiser Hellworld was the last time he was Pinhead. If he was in that at all, I'm not seeing that right away. But like that was the last. I'm not sure if Pinhead's in that one. I'm sure he is. But the first one that did not have Doug Bradley as Pinhead was Hellraiser Revelation. So however the timeline plays out, and I'm sure we'll get to it eventually without digging in right now. So we got 9 more. Well, 10 if you count the new one that's coming out next year. We've got 10 more Hellraiser movies ahead of us. So thanks to our patrons over at Patreon for giving us a lot of homework to do. Overall, though, this has not been a as far as the box office is concerned, this has not been what you would call a successful franchise at all. This first one made $14.5 million. The second one made a little over $12 million. The third one made $12.5 million, and then the fourth one, Bloodline, made $16.6 million. So that was actually the biggest box office of any of them, because all of the rest of them after that were like video releases and stuff. So like they don't even have any box office. I guess, you know, for whatever reason, it's become Smoke. I guess we could go to you for that. Like, do you consider like Pinhead and the Hellraiser series kind of like on? Is it on the Mount Rushmore, or is it kind of on the side of Mount Rushmore? Like, you know, you got the 4 heads on Mount Rushmore. Is Pinhead over on the side, or is he on the Mount Rushmore?
I would say he'd have to be almost. If we're talking about 4, let's say we're talking about 4, right?
Uh-huh.
I mean, 4 horror icons. I think he would be on the side. He might be a little bit off to the side on that, because you would have to pretty much put Jason, Michael, Leatherface, Freddy. If you're just doing 4, that's pretty much your 4 right there.
Yeah.
And then if you're doing maybe opening it up to 5, you might even get, even though Donnie won't like this answer.
Don't fucking say it.
You know where I'm going.
I know where you're going.
I know where you're going. It's Jesse James from Jesse James Meets Frankenstein's Daughter.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, of course you're right. It's Chucky, right?
Yeah. Much to Donnie's chagrin, he would probably pick Pinhead over Chucky any day.
I would. Yeah.
You know, I think that kind of sometimes we do this in episodes. I think that should be a Spook Show Spotlight episode. Let's all kind of give our own personal Mount Rushmore one of these days of of horror icons, so to speak. I'm sure they'll be kind of similar, but I think there'll be some differences there that you'd kind of be surprised by. So that would be kind of a cool little side experiment. But yeah, Doug Bradley, getting back to him, he is really. I mean, he's been in a ton of other things. I mean, like on IMDb, he's got 70 acting credits. that date back to 1973. He was in a couple short films in 1973 and 1978, but he didn't. His first feature film was Hellraiser in 1987. So his career took off, as far as horror-wise at that point, because he was in Hellbound, Hellraiser 2. Then he was in Nightbreed in 1990, Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth, and of course all the other Hellraisers. But from that point, I mean, like, he was a made man as far as horror stuff is concerned. And then of course he worked his way up to honky sausages before he went.
I'm sorry, dude. I just fucking lost it. I could not even fucking say the words.
Before he dipped
honky
his toes.
Sausages. Jesus.
I think on our next Spook Show Spotlight, we're going to be talking about honky sausages. I even clicked on it here just as a side note, and like it doesn't say anything about what the hell this is about, or it just says TV series. Like, there's no synopsis, no picture. I don't know what this was. So it must have been some random show in the UK or something that he just appeared on.
It's on Audible.
What? There's a honky sausages on Audible?
I said maybe it's on Audible.
Oh, okay. Well,
I'm actually gonna fucking look.
I thought you had already done the homework on that.
Like, what? No, there are no results for honky sausages.
But anyways, before we get to
into certain websites, you probably are going to get something other than that.
Yeah. I wouldn't look up honky sausages.
Too late.
Uh-oh.
No, yeah, it says TV program from 1999.
Hell, I knew that. I mean, it didn't give me any kind of synopsis. Like, I didn't.
Yeah, I clicked on overview and it doesn't give me shit.
Yeah. So there you go. But anyways, Doug Bradley played Pinhead, who in the credits they list as lead Cenobite. They never say the word Pinhead, so like I guess it just kind of took a life of its own after that. But the other three Cenobites that you see in the film are Chattering Cenobite, played by Nicholas Vince, Butterball Cenobite, played by Simon Bamford, and Female Cenobite, played by Grace Kirby. I guess that'll pretty much wrap it up as far as the cast and stuff is concerned. Was there anything else you guys wanted to point out that I didn't get to there before we go into the movie itself?
The only thing that I, as far as found was that they shot this in London, but I think the studio thought it would be better if it was set in America. Of course, they already shot it, but I think they dubbed in like American accents for some of the lines.
Yeah, they did that a lot back then. Like, for whatever reason, they're like, they filmed this in another country, and like, it'd be better if it was in America, and then they just, fudge it. I don't know why it has to be in America for something like this, but whatever. I guess that's just what was selling at the time, right? So it's just the way they would change movies. Because Smoke did in a lot of the Italian movies used to do the same thing, right? Remember, Demons was the same. Well, I guess that was no, they didn't do that, right? What am I thinking of? There's been some other Italian movies that basically did the same thing, but I don't think Demons was one of them. I take that back.
Now, there was a few, there's various movies from certain directors, say like Lucio Fulci, he had a few where his name was Louis Fuller. So they would angle his name to make it look like an American or English name. And but some had totally different names. Like you had I think Antonio Margheriti, and his name was like Anthony Dawson. I mean, that's and Bruno Mattei, I believe it was Bruno Mattei, whose name was Vincent Dawn. I mean, that was a cool name. I used to look for Dawn on videotapes when I was one because I knew that was Bruno Mattei. But so you had to kind of decipher some of these back then because I guess in the American market, Americans back then just liked to see American movies, or at least be tricked into seeing American movies.
Yeah.
So distributors didn't care as long as they got their money from it. They didn't care if somebody was watching, Lucio Fulci's New York Gladiator or whatever. I forget the name of it. There was one of those post-apocalyptic movies, Next Gladiator or something like that.
I will add two things before we continue on here. That one that I had pulled up earlier and forgot about, and then this other one I just found. To talk about Clive Barker doing this, this is basically kind of the same reasoning why Stephen King finally did Maximum Overdrive, right? Like, well, nobody can do it as good as I can do it, so I'm gonna give, I'm gonna kind of do my version of my shit, So that's kind of basically what's his motivation behind doing this. But I just saw. And this was on the Wikipedia page, Clive Barker had to make some cuts on the film after MPA gave it an X rating. The following scenes were cut for an R rating. 2.5 shots were excised from the first hammer murder, including a close-up of the hammer lodged in the victim's head. And you could totally see that, right? Like where they probably had to cut that all to pieces, like to make it suitable. Where she would drag the guys in just to kill them so Frank could suck their blood or whatever the hell he was doing. In the scene where Julia murders another man, the actor playing the victim felt that it made sense for him to do so naked. The nude murder scene was shot, but ultimately replaced with a semi-clothed version. So apparently this dude just wanted to be naked.
Noticed.
Yeah. Close-ups of Kirsty sticking her hand into Frank's stomach, exposing his guts. You can, if you're paying attention there, you can kind of tell that there was a cut because she kind of like sticks her hand in his stomach, but then he just kind of like lurches over, like and like falls to the ground. But you don't really see anything, and that would have been a perfect time to see something, gruesome there. Yeah. And a longer version of the scene where Frank is being torn into pieces by the Cenobite's hooks. Final shot where his head explodes and his brain messily splashes out was also cut. That's another one, if you're really, especially that one at the end there, right, where like they come back for him. And,
I hate that. Hate that.
You can see that they cut it though. It's just like he's about to get pulled apart, and then they just like close the door. Like you don't see it, really all the way kind of happen. In an interview in 1987, Clive Barker mentioned some problems that censors had with more erotic scenes in the film. His quote was, "Well, we did have a slight problem with the eroticism. I shot a much hotter flashback sequence than they would allow us to cut in. Mine was more explicit and less violent. They wanted to substitute one kind of undertow for another. I had a much more explicit sexual encounter between Frank and Julia, but they said no. Let's take out the sodomy and put in the flick knife." Well, I guess that's a fair trade-off, right?
Yeah.
So needless to say, surprise, surprise, there was some more vile shit that got cut out of this movie. So, anything else you guys wanted to add before we got into it?
Let's see. I think there was something like the chattering Cenobite and was it the blubbery one?
The Butterball.
Yeah, Butterball. I couldn't remember his character name. Anyway, they did have speaking parts, but once they got the makeup on, they just couldn't talk. It was like,
I could definitely see it with the chattering Cenobite. Like like the way that's going. Like, how the hell are you going to say anything? I guess they could have dubbed it in, right? But
that would have sounded like shit, though.
Yeah, it probably just made more sense all around. Like once they realized that, like, let's just give all the lines to Pinhead here.
Yeah, something else is that Doug Bradley he couldn't see well through his black contacts, and he was always kind of missing his spots. Like he couldn't see well. He was afraid of tripping over like Pinhead's skirt, and but no, he had trouble hitting his spots, and that's at the end.
It makes all right. Well, next week on the Spook Show, it makes sense. I mean, like when you've got this much going on with the contacts and the prosthetics and the makeup and the outfit, and even more so with the other Cenobites, it would make sense that it'd be hard to be mobile, or it would be hard to see.
I've never had full eye contacts.
I wear like regular contact lenses, but I've never put in like the these color changing, like the shit they use in movies. I've never done that. Yeah, so I don't know what the visibility is on those, but I'm sure back then it was even worse than it would be today. Whatever they were putting in their eyes with those glass contacts and stuff back then.
Jesus.
Time for refreshment. refreshment. For your enjoyment, there's hot, fresh popcorn, tempting, delicious hot dogs, and so many kinds of ice cream. And, of course, sparkling, delicious, ice-cold Coca-Cola for everybody at the refreshment counter now.
For you, the listeners of the All-American Spook Show Horror Podcast, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. Like we've been saying with this. You sign up using audibletrial.com/spookshow. They give you a free credit. You can take that credit and get a free audiobook on Audible. If you decide you don't want to keep, you don't want Audible, you don't want to pay for it, whatever your reasons, you can cancel it and you get to keep that free book. So it helps out the Spook Show and you get a free book out of it. So since we're on Clive Barker and Hellraiser here, I just typed in Clive Barker to see what would pop up. And of course, the first thing that pops up is The Hellbound Heart, a novel by Clive Barker, narrated by Jeffrey Kafer, and that is just a little over 3 hours long. So it's not long by Audible standards, but still, it'd be pretty cool to hear the source material for Hellraiser. Let's see, The Books of Blood, Volume 1 by Clive Barker. That one is almost 7 hours long. Weave World by Clive Barker. That one is over 21 hours long, so that's more your normal-sized novel there. And that one, it says here, is only from Audible, so I guess that's apparently the only place you can get the audiobook version of that, or maybe the book itself, period. I'm not sure. But either way, tons of Clive Barker's works on here. If it ain't everything Clive Barker's ever done, it's got to be pretty damn close. So if that sounds awesome to you, and it should, you need to go to audibletrial.com/spookshow to download your free audiobook today. Again, that's audibletrial.com/spookshow for your free audiobook. So I guess we'll go ahead and get into the movie here. Donnie, did you find anything else out on honky sausages while we were during the break?
Oh, man. Yeah, I'm going to try to get through this without bursting out laughing. But no, so Honky Sausages is basically a show. It's a British show. Completely lacks a premise at all. So that's why we couldn't find anything initially. But I did find a write-up on Vice, Vice.com about it. It's on this article called Shitcoms. So, yeah, this is basically what it's about. It's basically this character, well, say character, it's called Honky Mom. And she's basically the matriarch of a whole family of degenerates called Honky Dad, Honky Granddad, Honky Bitch, like just dumb shit. But no, like I said, completely lacks a premise. The plots are based on stuff like bursting blisters on the penis of a guy who wanks too much.
What?
No. I don't fucking know. But yeah. Yeah, it's just from what this article states, it's just a deplorable, it doesn't, just a offensive, utterly pointless piece of shit. And that's why it's in this article called Shitcoms.
So over on our Patreon, we're going to do a full review of Honky Sausages, and it's just going to be Willie talking about it, not us.
But yeah, it's a show in the UK. No surprise there, I guess, with Doug Bradley and the rest of this Hellraiser class or cast.
Well, we'll get to it, I guess, eventually. I guess if we have to. Maybe when we do a spotlight on Doug Bradley, we'll talk about it a little bit more. I don't know. I'm sure that won't be the last time you hear the term Honky Sausages. I got a sneaking suspicion.
Brutal.
Anyway, so let's go ahead and get into the movie itself. So, like, the movie starts with you come to find out that it's Frank at the beginning of the movie, and he's in some I don't even know exactly. Like, one thing I saw is like apparently he's supposed to be in Morocco or something, but who knows, right? Because it doesn't say where he's at. But he's in some like one of those open market type of things, and he's sitting at a table with like this Oriental guy who has this little puzzle box for sale, and Frank wants to buy it, so he gets it, and then he goes to then it cuts to him, I guess, coming back to America or wherever the hell he's at, and he solves the puzzle box, and then these chains with hooks on them, like, just appear out of nowhere, out of the walls, and just tear them apart. And then, like, it cuts back later, like, the room is filled with, like, I don't even know what, like, these chains and everything, and there's these big blocks of wood hanging from the ceiling, and they're spinning, and you can just see parts of his body laying everywhere. Then you see, like, somebody in, like, a black robe or whatever comes up and picks up the box, and then, like, returns the box to its original cube shape, and then that basically turns the room back to normal. Like, it's all gone. There's no body parts and blood everywhere. It's just back to normal. So what, Smoke, what'd you think of this opening scene? Like, this whole bit where him, with the box and what happens to him and everything, like, what are your thoughts on that?
It gives you a little bit, I guess, of the exoticness of the box, how it travels. Maybe not as much as what you get from the novella. But I kind of like the opening of it. You know what it kind of reminds me of? It a little bit is the Gremlins opening.
Yeah. It is very reminiscent, like the old Oriental guy that's just sitting there, like, "What is your pleasure, Mister?" I think he even says that, right? Like something like that. It's basically like the same lines.
It's very similar.
Yeah. You're not wrong there. It is very similar. Donnie, what'd you think of this open?
No, man, it was kind of confusing at first. It's just like, I'm like, all right, this looks like Indiana Jones. No, it kind of had the same, like you mentioned, the open market feel. That that's what I. Yeah, it's just it was fine.
Yeah, you're not wrong. It's a good comparison. Like, it definitely feels like that. Like, a scene that you would have seen like in Temple of Doom or something like that. Right?
Yeah.
Frankly, a lot of '80s movies had that kind of like, set up or a scene in it that were very similar in a lot of ways. Big Trouble in Little China was, in some ways similar, and a handful of other movies that I'm blanking on. But it seemed to kind of be like this little bit of a trope sometimes that would pop up in some 80s movies of like this old, like, mysterious Oriental guy in a market somewhere, like selling you things that he shouldn't be selling, kind of thing. Yeah.
But no,
Jurassic Park, did that open with the? I mean, it didn't necessarily open with it, but remember the whole Isla Nublar scene where he's with the hand cream, the eggs or whatever.
Yeah, there's some similarity there. Yeah, for sure.
And that was in the '90s. So
yeah.
Lived on after the '80s.
Yeah, it carried over.
Yeah.
I think it does a good job of setting up, like, you're in for some weird shit here. Like, you gather it, like, within the first 5 minutes of the movie, like, oh, here we go. This is going to be some whacked out shit. So some passage of time, like, you don't know exactly how long it's been, but some time later, Frank's brother Larry moves into the house, and I guess he's trying to work out, like, his relationship with his current wife Julia. You learn later on, like, apparently he was married before and she died somehow. Like, they don't really go in deep into that. I'm sure the book probably does more so. But apparently, like, something happened to her and Larry married Julia. And I guess Larry's teenage daughter, Kirsty, like, they don't get along. So, she's not with them. Like, she's kind of like, lives on her own. Like, she's got her, like, an apartment or some stuff across town. But, so they move into this house, for whatever reason. Like, did they even establish, like, why they had to move into this house? Because it seems like, well, we're going to move here, but I don't remember them saying.
I think it was his mom's house.
Yeah,
it was like his mom's house that was in the family or whatever.
Yeah, but usually the setup is like, well, I just lost my job, so we got to move back to the old homestead kind of thing. I don't remember them saying a reason. It was just like, well, what do you think? Let's move in. Okay.
Yeah. Like they do mention Brooklyn, like they were in Brooklyn or whatever.
That they lived in New York or something, and then all of a sudden, like, well, we had to leave there and come move here for some reason. But I don't remember if they explained why. But for whatever reason, they move into this house where this thing happened to Frank, but they don't know that because apparently Frank had been squatting there when he did all this. Apparently, they have this whole thing where Julia had an affair with Frank, like right before she got married to Larry. Because they have this whole flashback scene of, like, Frank coming in and like in the middle of a storm or something. So he's like, you got a towel or anything? You know, it just like, and then it just one thing leads to another, and she ends up having sex with Frank, like right before she gets married with Larry. So they're moving their stuff in, and like there's a couple of useless moving men with them, and Larry is helping them like carry the mattress upstairs, and then he just gashes his hand wide open on like a nail sticking out of the doorway, and then the blood drips on that because he goes up into the attic where Julia's hanging around like reminiscing about Frank, and his blood drips on the attic floor, and apparently his blood just going into the floorboards somehow manages to resurrect Frank, like he comes back to life. So what?
Well, maybe the book would offer a little bit more of an explanation here.
I'm sure it would.
Not blood that goes into the floor, but there's another bodily fluid on the floor with the blood that goes.
Okay.
Yes.
Damn you, Clive Barker.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was up there doing that. You know, it's like the blood mixed with that, maybe a whole bunch of little sperms. You know.
So Frank. So for however they set this up in the movie, though, the blood like goes under the floorboards or something, and Frank comes back as like a skinless corpse, who basically Julia comes in and finds him, and like basically like pretty much right away with little to no argument, she agrees to bring people in for him to like drain so it can fully restore his body. So basically, like, you go into a couple scenes here where Julia like goes to a bar, brings a guy back. She comes in, like, cracks the dude upside the head with a hammer, and she basically kills them, or they're almost dead. And then Frank rolls in, like, sticks his hand into their body. Like, I guess he kind of like, is he taking their blood, draining their life force? I don't even know exactly what the hell he's doing, but like, it's like
he sticks his fingers in their neck. Just
and,
like, yes.
And then they just like suck some dry, like, Killer Clowns from Outer Space style, and then that regenerates his body, little bit by little bit. Although like you never really see it come to full fruition throughout the movie, but little by little he becomes more and more like a normal person again. And then eventually Frank explains to Julia, like, what he had been doing. Like, basically, like, I guess he's like kind of, the Cenobites come along and they drag you to hell, right? Like, or is it like just some weird hellish nightmare scape? I don't know exactly where they take you. I don't know if it's full on hell or hell adjacent. I don't know. But basically, like, I've exhausted all sensory experiences and like learned carnal pleasures. So there's like this whole weird sadomasochistic part of the whole thing. Like, it's like he almost likes it, right? Like, I guess that's what he's going for, is like he loves that aspect of it. So I guess that's why he went and sought the box out, and because it's going to open up a portal of pleasures, that he can dive into, and then like one thing leads to another, and like, yeah, these things aren't here just for that. They're here to like rip you apart and take your soul literally. Which I guess that would come up with the hell part of it, right? I don't know. Like, this is hard to explain. Only Clive Barker truly understands what the fuck, I think, in my opinion. But when you do this puzzle box, which, did they ever have a name of the box? I mean, like Pandora's box, Hell Cube, like,
just call it the box.
Yeah, it's just a puzzle box, right? Like, Smoke, do you recall if they ever like put a name to that thing?
It was called the Lament configuration. And I don't remember I'm trying to think right now if they actually name it that in this movie, or if it's.
I don't recall hearing that.
No,
but
not in this one. I think maybe later on in later installments they explain it a little better, and maybe that's where it comes from, or maybe from the book or something like that, right? Where you get a deeper understanding of what the fuck's going on here.
It's got it does have a name in the book, but for whatever reason they changed it from the Lamarchand or Lamarchand. I don't know if that's a name, but the Lamarchand configuration, and in the movie it's the Lament configuration. So I don't know why they changed the name of it. And like I said, I don't even remember if they called it the Lament configuration in this first one. I just know it. I know that that's the name of it. So I think when I think of the puzzle box, I think of that name. So, but they may not have actually mentioned it in this movie. I know for sure it does pop up though. If not in this one, then the second one. but I don't know what the difference in the Marchand configuration from the book and Lament configuration in the movie. Why, other than the fact that it's a weird French name to pronounce,
So eventually Julia brings another guy to the house, and Kirsty, who's just coming over to spend some time with Julia, sees her bring the guy into the house, so she follows her up to the attic, where basically she busts in on Frank, feeding on this guy. Frank attacks her, but Kirsty manages to throw the puzzle box out of the window, allowing her to escape. She then grabs the box and then goes away, but then collapses, and then she wakes up in a hospital. And then, of course, the first thing you do when you've seen some fucked up stuff is, oh, here's that box. I'm going to go ahead and solve it and open up the gates of hell, right? She opens it, or solves the puzzle or whatever, and summons the Cenobites. And this is where you get the engineer, right? That's the that little weird, little gob monster. It's like an upside down monster or something that runs at her. I think that's the engineer, right?
I forget. Did they call? I mean, I don't know if that's.
I don't know if they ever named it. You just see holy shit, what the hell is that? It's just some little chewing gum monster with fucking teeth and claws and stuff. But I believe, at least from what I'm seeing here, I think that was the engineer that was chasing after her. But she manages to narrowly escape from him, and then you see Pinhead comes into the room anyways, once she gets away from that ghoul, and explains that basically, we are both angels and demons, and they are explorers from another dimension seeking carnal experiences. And they can no longer differentiate between pain and pleasure. And I think this is also, was that where you get the line, we have such sights to show you? Was this around that time, I believe?
Yeah, I believe it was that scene.
Yeah, the famous line, we have such sights to show you. But basically, they're going to take Christy, all right, you're coming with us. She's like, no, wait a minute. Frank escaped you, and I know where he's at. So, basically, all right, well, you take us to him, and we will consider, letting you go. But Frank, he has to confess to escaping them. So, they go away, and, so she's got to go get Frank. She goes back to the house, where apparently during that time period, Larry has come home, and Frank and Julie have killed Larry, and Frank is wearing Larry. He's wearing a Larry suit. He straight up stole his skin, and then.
I'm sorry, that was totally.
So Julia shows Kirsty. Frank's dead. Here's his corpse. Turns out that wasn't Frank. That was her dad, Larry. But she locked Kirsty in there. And then, of course, the Cenobites show up. And they're not fooled by the fact, no, this isn't fucking Frank. Where's he at? So Kirsty runs, but she's held by Julia and Frank. And then Frank reveals that he is, who he is. Right, I'm not Larry. I'm Frank, your dad's dead or whatever. And he basically tries to, come on to Kirsty, and she, of course, spurns him, and he decides to kill her. And this is going to complete his rejuvenation because, I guess he's basically one body away or whatever the hell. So he accidentally stabs Julia instead. Well, I wouldn't even say accidentally. I don't think he gave a shit, right? He just pretty much just stabs her right in the gut and then drains her and doesn't give a shit, just tosses her corpse to the side. And then Frank chases Kirsty to the attic, and then when he's about to kill her, the Cenobites appear, and basically because he has just confessed to killing Larry, they've heard enough. They grab a hold of Frank, because, now they've heard the confession. They grab a hold of him with chains, and then this is where they pull him apart. But, you don't see, you see the chains go in and everything, and he's, all strung up. His face is all, stretched out, and then he's licking his lips yeah. And then they pull his ass apart, but you don't see it all the way. You see enough to know what they just did, but you don't see it, play all the way out. Now now that they've got Frank where they got him back, right? They decide to turn and take Kirsty. So she goes and gets the puzzle box out of Julia's corpse's hands, and then she basically one by one manages to by reversing the motion of the box, she's able to get all the Cenobites to, they vanish back to wherever the hell they came from, right? Then Kirsty's boyfriend shows up basically just in time to help her get out of the house, as the house is like kind of collapsing. Then later, Kirsty goes and throws a puzzle box into like a fucking tire fire or something. Like it's like a hobo's fire, right? She throws it in. Meanwhile, I failed to mention this fucking hobo that pops up a couple of times throughout the movie. Like she's working in like a pet shop, and then this dude walks in and just takes a handful of crickets and starts eating them. Like they make no explanation what the hell is going on with this, and they never do.
Nope.
But I only mention them because, like, all right, so she throws the puzzle box into the fire here at the end, and this hobo finally walks back up, and then he walks into the fire and grabs a hold of the box, and all of a sudden just bam, he's a fucking like winged skeleton creature on fire. And then he just flies away. Then you basically cut back to pretty much the setup at the beginning of the movie. You're back in that, Moroccan open air market or whatever. And now that dude is still sitting there. What's your pleasure, mister? And it's a different guy. It's not Frank. It's another guy, I guess, coming to get the box. So there you go, Hellraiser from 1987. So I guess the first question is, what the hell was up with the hobo guy? What do you think? What do you think, Donnie?
I don't know, man.
Smoke, you got a better idea? Like what the hell?
I don't know about if he was in the novel. Like you said, the novella, the novella, I remember certain parts of, but I haven't read it since way back when either. So I don't know what his role is in the book. But yeah, just
what?
He's a minion from hell, I guess, or is a minion that has some connection to the box, to the Cenobites, but I don't know what.
He just makes sure that the box gets back in the hands of the old Oriental guy to sell it back to the next guy or whatever.
They did shoot in the house. Maybe it was the homeowner.
Yeah.
And he's like, I got to be in here. You can use the house.
Well,
I won't take any money.
Cool?
I have to be a hobo. And
are you cool with eating? Are you cool with eating crickets and turning into a winged serpent, skeleton serpent? Yeah. All right. Well, you're in.
You're in.
The other part I failed to mention there at the end where they pull Frank apart at the very end. The last thing, like as he's licking his lips, he says, "Jesus wept," and then they pull him apart. Good Lord.
That was supposed to be. It was supposed to be "fu," or "fuck you." I guess there's what's the point of censoring? But no. And then
so the line was supposed to be "fuck you," and he said Jesus wept instead.
Yep. I don't know why.
Well, it's as fucked up as anything else in this movie, I guess. Why not end it that way? All right, so I guess that's it for Hellraiser. So I guess Donnie, I'll toss to you first. What are your thoughts and what's your star rating?
Oh man, this was I'm always going to give a higher rating to those with practical effects. I grew up like just in that age. Man, it's just there's so many iconic scenes in this movie. I'm going to go 3.25. I'm going to go 3.25.
We'll obviously get Will's thoughts on this on the next episode, but Smoke, I'll toss to you. What's your star rating on it and thoughts?
I echo Donnie as far as it being an iconic horror movies in the 80s. And also one, though, that doesn't fit as well with everybody, because I remember some of my friends a couple of friends in particular who were also very much into horror movies back then, hated Hellraiser movies for some reason. And you get a lot of times that you'll come across people who just don't like it, and I mean you could see we talked about the movie not making a whole lot of sense as far as where it goes. And just the whole sadomasochistic angle or whatever, or the whole supernatural, like completely supernatural religious element. I don't know, that puts some people off that are maybe just into slasher type stuff or that expect something different from an 80s horror movie or whatever. So. But I always liked it from the beginning, and I know every time I watch it, it doesn't necessarily grow on me because I know everything that's already happened in the movie, but it doesn't diminish any. every time I watch it. So it's rewatchable, even though it doesn't make a whole lot of sense,
Yeah.
as far as what's really going on in the film. But other than the bare bones basics, the novel, like I said, the novella goes into a little bit more into it, but it isn't going to fully explain everything either. So, and I think that also kind of adds to the charm of it, that not everything is explained. And back in the 80s, they didn't tend to leave the viewer with with that type of ambiguous ending. Usually they explained a lot of things, or over-explained, or you get a full story, unless we're talking about an Italian horror movie like Fury or whatever, or is the Beyond or something.
Where there was a loose thread of a story to begin with.
Yeah. This sort of has that European horror sensibility to it. I mean, it was made in Britain, so I mean, I guess it's all European horror, but it has a little bit of that to it. But it's somewhat Americanized too. Just the way it's put together, it very much feels like a Hollywood movie, even though it wasn't necessarily made in the Hollywood system in the 80s. So, but it has that same feel. I'm gonna go with 3.5 on it. I definitely enjoy it. It's iconic. It's a classic. You can watch it over and over again. So yeah, I'll go with 3.5.
I'm going to echo your score, and I'm going to go 3.5 myself, and a lot for the same reasons. This is one I've always enjoyed. It has a little bit of home field advantage for me. It's a little bit of a sentimental favorite. I've always enjoyed this one, even though, like we've said, a lot of it doesn't make a whole hell of a lot of sense. I think most of it only makes sense to somebody basically to Clive Barker and anyone that's like really into sadomasochism or something like that. I guess, you might maybe understand a little bit more what the hell's going on here. Pinhead and the Cenobites or whatever are like horror icons, I think it's a cool concept. The as far as like their look and everything, and the special effects, the practical effects in this film, it's all done very well. A lot better, and like we said at the beginning, a movie that supposedly had $1 million budget was able to pull this off. I mean, very impressive, especially since it was the first time that Clive Barker had ever directed anything at all. I'm sure he had experienced people around him. That's usually how it works, but not to take anything away from him. But I think that being said, it was a very well done movie. So 3.5 for me. All right, so that naturally, Will's not here to do his kill count, so hopefully we'll get that next episode. We'll get a definitive number, but we'll go ahead and toss to you, Donnie, for the connections.
Connections from the crypt.
Squeeze every laugh.
Yeah, man. So we have, which you alluded to earlier, Christopher Young, the composer for Hellraiser. He also dates back to our previous episode, Trick or Treat from 1986, as well as The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. He was composer there as well. So 3 episodes, Hellraiser, Conjuring, Devil Made Me Do It, and Trick or Treat. Christopher Young. Yep.
I find it hard to recall any music from Trick or Treat that wasn't like from that sound. The what was it, Fastway Smoke that did the soundtrack for that.
You don't really think about the other incidental soundtrack music.
Yeah. Because the only thing that comes to mind when I think about it is all those cuts, all that music from them. So, like, I'm sure there must have been other music. Now, I'm sure that's what he did, but the Fastway stuff is the more memorable stuff from that film. But either way, there's always a composer usually, even though there might be someone else that did, like, the main soundtrack or whatever. But all right, so Smoke, I'll toss to you.
Gore score.
Yeah, that's this one is a juicy one, and like I said, I usually defer to Chaz Balin, the namesake of the Gore score, for when I'm doing these, if he has done a movie, and he did do Hellraiser, he did give it a score, but this is going to be one instance where I'm going to change it from what he had on there, because he gave it a 10, and that's pretty high, and it is gory. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of splatter in this movie, and like we talked about it, for a movie made outside of Hollywood, within the Hollywood system, and released within the United States, like in the theaters, like any other Hollywood movie, it had more gore than most of the movies going on at that time. And I think that's also has to do with the slasher movies had that crackdown going, where parents and everybody were kind of up in arms about slasher movies where kids are cheering on Jason and Michael and Freddy and all this. And so they kind of cracked down on gore in those types of movies. And I think maybe because this was a supernatural horror movie, had that element, maybe that was the reason why they were able to get some more of the splatter into this movie than they were into slasher movies at the time. So it definitely was juicier than most movies coming out in the tail end of the 80s. So I'm going to give it an 8 for the gore score. Like I said, great practical effects, very bloody. I mean, you're dealing with Frank, who's in various stages of his flesh coming back on them. So it's a lot of juicy skin suit scenes, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Killing these people, regenerating his body. So, not to mention him, flying apart at the end. Even though, okay, now if we were able to see the uncut version of this, like if there were some uncut version laying around that they found or came across, I would assume if they had that, they would have already released the uncut version. But if they were in the future ever to find this footage, put it out there, maybe it would be a 10. I'm hoping that footage exists somewhere and that it comes together in an unrated, edition at some point. So
you would think it's out there somewhere, simply because like it apparently did exist in one form or another, because it got an X rating, and then they had to cut a bunch of stuff out to get it to the R. So that means there has to be a working print or something somewhere out there that, unless they just that ain't gonna work, and then throw it in a trash can. But you think they can get their hands on it?
That happens. Sometimes they do. It gets cut out, and then the footage gets lost or tossed or whatever.
That was the story that I think we've talked about before with Friday the 13th Part 2, right? Where like they had to cut some stuff out to get it put out at whatever rating, the R rating, and then eventually one of the guys that worked on the movie just happened to have kept like basically a VHS of the original cut, and then they got a hold of it and remastered it or whatever, and recut it for that Blu-ray release a couple years ago. But yeah, so I mean, essentially we'd be waiting on something like that probably. Like hopefully someone that was involved in the production of it just decided to keep a copy of it, and maybe they can get their hands on it one day.
That's actually been more than that movie too, because I can remember My Bloody Valentine, I believe, had the same issue where it was a lot gorier, and that footage got lost for a while, and a VHS tape surfaced, and they were able to piece together. It's very visible when you remaster a movie from an original 5mm print, and then you try and throw some VHS in there. It's going to be noticeable, but at least it does exist. So
yeah, exactly.
Hopefully footage exists somewhere, even if it's on a VHS tape.
Well, we can hope for that one day, but until then, next episode, we're going to be talking about the Spookshow Spotlight on Clive Barker. So we have more sights to show you next week on
nice.
About Clive Barker. We'll take a deep dive into his career, since we didn't really go too deep in this episode, so we'll take advantage of that on the next one. So look forward to that. And then 2 weeks from then will be episode 83, and that will be, we haven't decided which Thanksgiving movie we're going to watch yet, but that will be our Thanksgiving special. So we'll let you know next week what movie we're going to be watching for episode 83, which that comes out November 22nd. So that's literally the Monday before Thanksgiving. So once we make a decision there, I'm sure we'll put it out on the socials, and we'll mention it next week on the Spookshow Spotlight of Clive Barker, what's coming up. So you can go ahead and watch it and be ready for that. So I guess that'll pretty much wrap it up here for Hellraiser, and come back next week for our deep dive into Clive Barker. So for Will, of course, who couldn't be with us except for that little pre-recorded segment at the beginning, and for Donnie and the Professor Smoke, I'm Josh. We are the All-American Spookshow Horror Podcast, and we will talk to you next week.
And now, folks, it's time to say goodnight. We sincerely appreciate your patronage and hope we've succeeded in bringing you an enjoyable evening of entertainment. Please drive home carefully and come back again soon. Good night.